It's always a double-edged sword when you're wanting to go into network with insurances. You have to do what's best for the practice, and you don't want to undersell yourself because some of these fee schedules are not great. But at the same time, can your patients afford to pay what your self-pay rate is?
Kick it.
Summer, thanks for joining us. I hear you're a little bit of a credentialing wizard. So why don't you at least explain your background and what you're currently doing?
So I come from an oral surgery practice running their RCM and credentialing piece of the practice. So I was there for 3 years, got a lot of providers credentialed, a lot of intake in the front office situated. Currently right now is the RCM Success Specialist for our enterprise clients.
And tell me real quick with maybe what are you noticing is like some of the biggest problems with credentialing in the PTOT space right now?
Providers thinking they don't have to credential with certain payers, especially like trying to get out of network payment. They can just go without credentialing. And then a lot of payers giving people not like effective dates, but telling them, hey, we've got you added to the network, but not a firm effective date. So clinics will start seeing patients and then they'll get their effective date a couple weeks later. And if they don't retro, then you're looking at a lot of missed revenue or stuff actually processing out of network. So it's very fine line having to read that contract to make sure that one, it is approved and you have your effective date so you can start billing, because a lot of insurances will not backdate your credentialing. So you start seeing a lot of clients or a lot of patients, and you're not getting paid what you could have gotten paid when you're going in network.
And I mean, if you see a patient 3 times a week for 6 weeks before that effective date, that is a lot of visits, a lot of units that you don't get back.
It's a lot of money. And it's missed money. It's easy money that they have to end up adjusting a lot of times due to like invalid credentialing, like adjustments, especially for your Medicaids, because you can't bill those patients. And they're not going to, for the most part, retro back that effective date. So there's maybe not be a lot of money, talking about Medicaid, but that is money that's left on the table that's easily something that can be preventable.
With credentialing, like explain a little bit more what the effective date is, maybe where practice owners could find that info, just so they don't miss that. And then would you say that credentialing is one of the biggest causes of denials right now?
For finding that effective date, it's usually given to you like from the contract. So you usually get a welcome letter saying, here is your effective date. You can start seeing these patients 1/1/2026. Now, a lot of providers and the stuff can get lost where it'll go maybe to the wrong mailing address, or it just gets chunked because they think it's nothing special. But those welcome letters, and a lot of time now they're digital, but that's really important to save, because that right there can be the difference of an insurance going, oh, well, we didn't have you effective. And then when you have nothing to appeal it, like the denials with, always proof of documentation. Keeping those welcome letters, those original effective dates from your provider reps are super important. And also keeping a master list of credentialing, especially with practices that have multiple locations and you're dealing with multiple insurances. Someone has to stay on top of that, because again, those credentialing denials, they're some of the easiest to prevent. And you see a lot of it where, patients are in, they want to get treated, especially with your startups, and even clinics adding new locations and just missing that key step of getting the location credentialed, getting the providers that might be going to that location if it requires it, and then keeping up with, oh, I added this new location, but I never credentialed the location. So it's a lot to keep up with, but having someone dedicated to credentialing is probably one of the best maneuvers for an office to make sure they get paid. So that way, you have one point of contact that's handling everything, whether it be an outside insurance or an outside credentialing company or someone that has credentialing experience in the office to keep tabs on it.
And so you were talking about recommending, having one person. Is that best with a clinician, a biller, a front desk? Who do you recommend?
Someone with credentialing experience. The one thing you do not want to mess with is asking your front desk that might have limited insurance experience to credential you, or a clinician that is starting out that really, they don't have a lot, but when you start getting into payers, your Medicare is probably the easiest credentialing. It asks for a lot, but that's the easiest one to get credentialed with. But when you start getting into commercial contracts, you need someone that understands the language, that can understand the fee schedule you're agreeing to. This is why some clinicians get stuck with really bad fee schedules because they don't really know exactly what they're agreeing to, especially your flat rates and just those low fee schedules in general. So I always recommend, even starting out, you need someone that has credentialing experience if you're going to do it in-house. And if you're not, then you need to get a credentialing company, even if it might be a little pricey, to help you along the way.
Are you saying that if you do go with a credentialing company, that maybe the cost outweighs the means in the end run if you don't do it correctly on your own?
Yes. We run into a lot of providers that'll credential themselves, but maybe missed putting it under the group instead of the individual. Your NPIs, your tax IDs, if you have multiple, there's a lot of issues. And what it is once you get approved, it's hard to update this stuff. And then the insurance can be like, oh, well, we got the approval this day, but it processed. You have to send claims back. Do it right the first time. You shouldn't have any issues. But that misstep right there, that is a killer for a practice starting out and for established practices that might be opening new locations. And you want to see patients and you want to treat, but you also have to get paid for it. And that's a big, big thing if you miss that. And then you're stuck trying to catch up the money on the back end. It's not a good fit.
So I haven't done credentialing before personally. So are most of the credentialing process, is it done online? Is it walk me through that process of what does that actually look like, whether it's commercial or with Medicaid or Medicare?
So Medicare runs through PICOs. So your Medicaid usually runs through your state, website for Medicaid. A lot of this is electronic now. So Blue Cross Blue Shield uses Availity for the most part, I believe. I've only done Tennessee and Georgia credentialing, but most of the time you'll see it online and you're giving them all the information, also making sure you give them the correct information of how you want your claims to be billed. Because some will set up under the group, some are going to be set up under the individual, some require both. So if you might have your group in network, but if you never linked your provider to the group, like a new provider coming on board, and you think everything's good and we got claims start rolling through, be submitted, the next thing you know, you got 10 rejections saying that the NPI for the provider is not attached to the group. So it is a lot, and also your waiting time. So you could submit an application, let's say today. That application might not be reviewed until 60 days from now, even longer. Could be shorter. But one thing providers will think is, oh, well, I submitted it today, so that's going to be my effective date. So now you're seeing all of these people thinking your provider is going to get paid. That is not a guarantee that they're going to go back to that original, here's when it was submitted, here's my ticket number, my case number, X, Y, and Z. And then now you have to make the decision. Let's say you saw $5,000 worth of claims for a couple patients for this provider. Are you going to let all of that go toward their out-of-network benefits? If they don't have any out-of-network benefits, what are we doing? Because we didn't tell the patient. So it's very, very fine line when starting out and credentialing to make sure, one, all the information is correct. The fee schedule that you're going to be agreeing to is something that you do want. And then are they going to go back and retro that effective date from the date that I submit the application? Or am I going to still have to hold off on letting this PTOT, ST see these patients until I have that welcome letter in my hand?
And you were saying they might not be reviewed, that application, until 60 days. What is a healthy timeline that maybe a new practice owner could imagine just to be on the safe side? Is there something you've seen as long as 4 to 5 months?
It really just depends on how backed up the payers are at that time. And also, it's never a guarantee that they're going to let you on the network. You only see that for the most part for Medicaids and MCOs for Medicaids, that there might be too many providers in the area and they're not going to let you on the network. I know that. And PT, STOT, that's a pretty big specialty, but that could also be a case where you think you're going to get in network and then they'll be, no, not right now. We have enough providers. I feel like that's probably few and far between, but I would say a good expected turnaround time is at least 45 days. 45 to 60 is where you're going to be, and then making sure they have everything that they need, because if you submit stuff and then they ask for additional information, getting that to them quickly, as quick as possible. If you miss attaching a license, if you miss attaching any kind of malpractice if they need it, that can always just delay you getting that approval if they have to continuously ask for information.
So there's some clinics that may have different locations and it might even split borders between states. How different are the credentialing processes that you've seen with different states, or how can even a practice in multiple state locations, how can they navigate that?
I think the first thing is making sure that they are looking at their individual states and seeing what is needed. You'll have a lot of payers, Blue Cross is a good example. For the most part, Blue Cross, you're billing to your local payer. So if you have a practice in Tennessee, it's going to Blue Cross Tennessee. If you have a practice in Georgia, it's going to Anthem of Georgia. So you have to credential with both. You don't just credential once. Where you get into problems is running into like states that border each other, and what's called contiguous county rules start applying, which is not fun to deal with.
Okay. Explain more on that.
So contiguous county means that essentially the lines on the state are kind of touching, and the patient may live in Ohio, but they might go get services in a state because it's only 20 minutes from the line. So they're crossing over, but they live in a certain one. So you have to make sure you're filing claims to the appropriate Blue Cross. That's where you run into the most is contiguous is Medicaid and Blue Cross. But Blue Cross will get you real quick if you're filing to the wrong payer from where that line is.
Okay, good to know. I think there's even like a famous city that's known for this. Is it like Texarkana, where it's like Texas and Arkansas, and they have the city right on the border? That could be a nightmare.
And your front desk is one of those, making sure your data entry is good so you know what payer that it's going to go to. And then you have the wonderful world of the processing side where they're not paying attention either. And it could be a clean claim, but they're still denying because they're used to seeing it goes to the local plan. But if you take 2 seconds to like look and see where the patient might live versus where they're getting services, is a contiguous county rule applied here? So getting into that, there's a lot of room for error on both the clinician side and also the payer side in processing. And it's one of those that you just have to really stay on top of for follow-up. And you'll see a lot of Medicaids for the same thing, states where, you might be credentialed in Kentucky, but you go to Tennessee to get services right on the line. You still have to have the Tennessee contract too. And a lot of Medicaids allow you to have, within a certain distance, they'll allow you to get other states' Medicaid.
So just knowing the rules and working it out and being very specific. You can't just follow what your buddy in Oregon does if you live in Oklahoma.
Correct. And that just circles back to making sure you have someone at your office that knows credentialing, or a company that does credentialing that can do all this stuff for you. The providers, you want to treat patients. That's your goal. This little administrative things, I say little, but the administrative things with credentialing, you guys don't want that. Let someone handle it that knows what they're doing so they can get you paid. And you take care of the patients that are coming in and making sure they're having a good experience and they're getting the help that they need.
I like that point. Sometimes there's this misconception in the industry where they need to become in network with every payer or be credentialed with every payer. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like you have to look at your geographical location. If you are in a location that you have a very dense population of Medicaid, the chances of you being able to be out of network with commercial insurances decrease because a lot of patients can't afford to pay out of network and they're going to go somewhere in network. You also have to look at how many other providers are around you. What do they take? Because if you have 10 other practices within a 50-mile radius of you, so you're centered, you got 10 other practices in 50 miles. Of those 10 other practices, all of them take Blue Cross. Guess what? Blue Cross is one of the biggest payers. Do they pay great? Depending on your contract, maybe, maybe not. But are you going to turn away all the Blue Cross business for them to go somewhere in network that's very easily accessible to them? It's always a double-edged sword when you're wanting to go into network with insurances. And you have to do what's best for the practice. And you don't want to undersell yourself because some of these fee schedules are not great. But at the same time, can your patients afford to pay what your self-pay rate is? Your self-pay rate, let's say a good example is UMR. UMR has a flat rate of 55 first, let's just say, for example. Now, your self-pay rate is, let's say, 90 a visit. But that patient needs to come 3 times a week. They're going to pay that $55, or their $55 copay, whereas paying $90 3 times a week. So you can cut off access to patients but you can also get yourself into a lot of bad contracts. So you have to look, if you already have 3 flat rate contracts, the chances of you wanting another one, or the chances of you wanting any flat rates, is not great, depending on what you can get. It's just one of those things that you have to weigh, is also how many referrals are you getting with a certain insurance? If you have one referral for one patient with Aetna, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to go in and get an Aetna contract. Can you work something out with this patient until you see enough of Aetna come through that you might want to look at contracting? That's one thing you have to take into consideration. Now, especially if you're starting out, you want to get in network because you might not have the referral count. But if you start getting a network, you've got 10 insurances with really crappy fee schedules, and now you're stuck, getting that reimbursement when you could have maybe only got a network with 3 and worked something out with a patient on a self-pay basis because what is around your area also didn't take that insurance. A good example is United Healthcare. A lot of people are coming out of network due to processing issues. So if just about everybody's out of network, you might not necessarily need to get in network. You can kind of leverage what your self-pay rate would be, maybe give some kind of discount, do something for, those patients to get them to stay and come with you without being seen at network. Again, fine line that you have to think about, and your patient demographic, what's around you, what other practices are accepting that insurance. And then you have to make that decision, which isn't easy to make. And like I said, a lot of providers will just go in and get every contract they can. And then coming out of network with an insurance, it's not an easy process. It's easy to say, I want a term according to my contract, give them a 60-day written notice. But guess what? That's not a guarantee that those claims are going to stop processing in network. You see a lot of providers that, insurances will get a claim a year after you term and still process it in network. Then you got to call, hey, we're not in network. This needs to be reprocessed out of network. Oh, yeah, we see that. There we go. Claim goes back through. You got another 30 days. Maybe they process it out of network. Maybe they don't. And you have to call again.
It sounds very tedious. Like, I feel like,
it's a game situation with these to see what they're going to do. So the best step is to, if you're going to be in network, be in network. But if you're not, then don't make that decision after you've already signed up. Now, sometimes, that it has to happen and you have to go out of network.
Right. But there's a difference between reacting versus planning.
Correct. And a lot of new providers will think, all right, I've got to get even all the major carriers, your Blue Cross, Aetna, United Healthcare. Humana doesn't have commercial anymore. But all of your big wigs. But that might not be the case if you never see an Aetna patient, but once every blue moon that comes through, and talking to your referrals. So if you're getting referrals from certain offices, what do they take? So let's say you're getting referrals from Dr. Smith, from the orthopedic center right down the road. Oh, he only takes, United Healthcare. So he's got a lot of United Healthcare patients that he's probably going to send your way. Okay, so maybe I need to look in to see, okay, what can I do? I want to make a good relationship. So, I'd like to take care of his patients. So I need to look and see about getting in network with these, the insurances that he takes. Just so that way you have a smooth, streamlined process of getting a referral in and you don't have to turn someone away or tell them, hey, we don't take this insurance. It's one thing to look at too, depending on where you're getting your referral sources.
You were saying something about looking at demographics and looking at other practices. Where do you even find that information of what other providers or practices might be using or credentialed? Like, how do you find that?
So what I would do is go on to like the payer's website and go find a provider and look for your specialties and then set your, your range. So what 20 miles from zip code, whatever zip code you're in, what all PT practices pull up. So you could see of all the PTs that are in network with this insurance within the zip code. And you can kind of see, we've got 10 other practices that take this insurance that that patient can drive to.
That's a good point. I like that idea. You have to do some research. You have to do some time, but that's part of the plan. You can't just walk into being a PT owner and not doing your research or market analysis.
That also comes in, your standard, obviously your Medicare. A lot of patients or a lot of providers don't want to get a network with Medicaid due to the reimbursement, which is totally understandable. But if you have a very high Medicaid market and then you're turning away Medicaid, that could hinder you too, because a lot of times people that are on Medicaid might actually have a commercial insurance and then Medicaid is secondary. But a patient's not going to go somewhere for that Medicaid. They're like, no, we don't take that. We don't do that. So it's just one of those things that you have to understand who you're treating as a whole to make those decisions and who has the money that could actually be self-pay. Because if you're in, Metro Atlanta opening an office, it's pretty wealthy. You could probably get away with not going in network. But if you're in a rural county and, you might only have another PT practice that's 30 minutes away from you for a patient, and then you look and say, oh, well, I don't even see them in network with this insurance. Maybe that's the market that I want to have. But you have to do your due diligence. And you have to look. It's not as simple as being like, I want to take these and then calling it a day and wiping your hands of it.
With we're negotiating your contracts, is there anything that you've noticed as a good strategy or maybe a good timeline when maybe you're looking at your payer contract or fee schedule and you might want to renegotiate?
It depends on the insurance one to see if they have windows to updating fee schedules, because some plans will be like, here's the fee schedule for, the year, and they might not be open to it. Your Medicaid contract is going to be the hardest to try to renegotiate. Your commercials are probably going to be more streamlined to the area than seeing how many. I want to say it really depends on what your contract says regarding your fee schedule. And that's one thing, is talking to someone from the insurance and the credentialing side is, okay, if I agree to this contract, I'm in it for however long that the contract is there. After so many months, after so many years, do I get the option to request an upgrade in the fee schedule? Depending on what they say, it could be putting together a proposal going, for the year, I have seen 280 of your patients. Of the 280, that's what I was treating. This is the fee schedule. This is what we've got. I do plan to stay in network. I would like a fee schedule increase up to, 2%, 3% on certain CPT codes, things like that. I'm one of those people, if you never ask, the answer is always no. But you do have to put together something, and it can't just be a phone call going, hey, I'd like a raise. Can I get my fee schedule raised?
You gotta show your work.
Yes. If you've only saw one or two patients with an insurance, the chances of them upgrading that fee schedule are not good. But if you can give them a list of, here's what we've seen, here's what we're proposing, where does this fall within the timeline to request a fee schedule increase? And sometimes, fee schedule increases are raised on the payer level itself after looking for a certain time. It's not a guarantee. Same thing with your flat rates. You can put a proposal in. It's not a guarantee that they're going to do it. So you just got to be picky about original contracting, but then also checking to make sure, when can you request a fee schedule increase? If you're agreeing to this now, am I stuck 5 years into, not 5, but am I stuck here and I don't have any opportunity to request? And then how would you guys have to, how do I have to put in a request? It could be a form that has to be submitted. It could be a proposal. It could be, actually, we need all of this information. How many patients have you seen? What's their demographic look like? How far away did they have to drive to get to, your office? Things like that could impact them approving or disapproving that, or just saying, no, this is what our fee schedule is. Tough.
Does authorizations play into that at all? Like, if you're respecting and having a good relationship with a certain payer where you follow authorization, pre-authorization rules, does that play into it, or can that hinder if you're constantly having to ask for retro authorization?
I don't know if it would hinder it, but I definitely don't think it would. I don't think you would be getting the best outcome. You're kind of setting yourself up there, because what they'll do is they'll probably look at claim data and they're going to see of, what was processed with missing modifiers. What all did y'all send in that didn't pay? You had, of the so many you saw, 50% of those were denied first time around due to an administrative issue, due to a missing modifier, due to auth, due to invalid X, Y, and Z. Insurers don't need a reason to deny. So pick one and then they'll look at it. And so I wouldn't know if it would hinder, but I definitely think it wouldn't help if they see all of that information on there.
Is there any recommendations that you have for authorizations that people need to know about when it comes to credentialing and payers that they need to be aware of?
What we're seeing now is, even on authorization, like, what they're doing is applying late penalties. This is very common happening right now with Blue Cross, is they'll deny for no auth. It was a miss at the front. We didn't get it, or the clinic didn't get it. And then it comes back around. Oh, well, here's the retro approval. Excellent. Everything's good. We submit corrected claims. Guess what? Denied again. Why is that denied again? Because it says we want a letter of extenuating circumstances on why you, the clinic, did not get an authorization according to your contract. It's like a catch-22. Authorizations never guarantee a payment. Never. But they give this retro auth, and it seems like out of the goodness of their heart. But then when you try to get paid under the auth, they're like, no. You didn't get it according to your contract. Now I want you to write a letter. It's kind of like almost being in school where you had to write sentences because you didn't do something. That's what it feels like. And I'm sure it feels like that to providers too, because they're having to go in and type up a letter going, I'm so sorry. I missed an auth. Please accept my dearest apology. Please pay us.
It feels like a Dolores Umbridge, punishment, Harry Potter punishment.
Yeah. And
for any nerds that get that reference.
And that takes time out of the clinic to write that letter, or the front desk, whoever's doing it. And then you have to submit it. Turnaround time probably for an appeal, which would be what that would be considered, or a reconsideration, 60 days, roughly. So now, you already got delayed 30 days to get the claim processed. Now you're going to have another 60 once that letter is done, that the clinic has to take the time to write it and send it, all because of that one little step for auth. And then there's not a guarantee that they're going to overturn that. We've seen it a lot. We've seen a couple be overturned. And what's the worst is they'll overturn like the first date, and then they won't overturn the rest of them. Because let's say you missed 3 dates of service with auth. They might give you the first one, then going, nah, 1 was an accident. 2 and 3, that's on you. It's very frustrating too, because they took the time to do that, to try to get paid. And it's basically like a smack on the hand going, no, sorry, not our problem. Which, I mean, if you think of it from the insurance level, they are right. But the fact that they're going to penalize someone for getting a retro auth and approving the retro auth was what kills me. And then still, once they already go through the hoops to get the retro auth, they're still denying it. They're still denying it after they get the letter. You would think it would just save everyone time being like, you didn't get it. That sucks. But, better luck next time. And then that's just something you put in place, moving forward. It's a live and learn situation. But that's where they are right now on fun little processing.
Feels a little demoralizing if you were to walk into this podcast and just learn about all these things that can kind of come against you and getting paid. So maybe my last question is, what are some pieces of advice or things that clinic owners need to look at so they can protect themselves from these things? Like, what are the best things they can do to make it, or even let's set the expectation, like how many denials or how many of these problems should they be expecting when things are going smoothly?
Insurance it's a game. It's always a game. So you have to be expecting denials almost, but fixing them, it can still deny. It could be a clean claim. There could be an auth on file. Modifiers are correct. Credentialing is correct. And then you could still get a non-specific denial. And then when you call the insurance to review the denial, they're going, oh, yeah, no, we see the auth on the claim. We're going to send it back for review. Now that just delayed that claim. So it's going to happen. What you have to do to prevent that is making sure that your intake processes are airtight, which means as soon as you get a referral and you confirm the insurance, you're putting them with a provider that's credentialed to that insurance. That is step 1. A credentialing denial is probably the easiest to avoid. And I wouldn't say, again, you can't say that they'll never deny it, because they will. But if you have everything in place and you have your welcome letter as documentation, if they do end up denying it because they didn't look close enough at the claim, the NPIs they didn't check, then it's here's my contract, here's my effective date, so it's appeal and it should be overturned. And the next step is, verifying benefits. Our auth is auth required. Those steps right there to get auth and to make sure you're sending something or putting something with a PTO TST that's in network, those are non-negotiable things that have to be done. That is not a skip step. That is not something that should be easily overlooked. If you have those 2 processes, verifying insurance, scheduling with appropriate credentialed providers, those 2 things right there can decrease your denials. because it gives the payer less of a reason to come back and deny something.
Well, I love those steps. And for anyone who's listening or watching, like now you have a little bit of a playbook of what to expect and things that you can probably implement. But thank you, Summer, for coming on and explaining some of those things. Really enjoyed it.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Strata Stories. Strata PT combines your EMR and billing into one automated system to increase revenue and achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate for physical, occupational, and speech therapy clinics. If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and billing services work, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.